tell me that thing again about resisting.
Well, I said, I've spent an entire lifetime, certainly in my adult lifetime, clear that I have not wanted my life story to be my work. And yet at some core level, I know that it is.
Yeah.
And, okay, so here we go. And so maybe the story that wants to be told right now is the story of my sister's death, which I always thought I wouldn't tell either until maybe my parents were gone.
Yeah.
But they're not gone, and it's maybe not one they'd listen to. But I was the oldest of four, and we were all within about 5.5 years. It was me, then my sister Nancy, my brother Craig, and my sister Allison Joy. And we lost her to suicide, gunshot wound to the heart. I saw it coming. I tried to save her. I tried to save my family, and I failed in both endeavors. At least that's the story I told myself then.
Yeah.
She and I were a lot alike. We were peas in a pod, and we were both not going to put up with what was happening. And we fought differently. And for years I thought I didn't have the courage to pull the trigger. But one of the things, after doing a lot of work in PTSD area, I have complex PTSD. I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress in 3 counts for separate things, not that. But I've learned that, women don't kill themselves that way. Gunshot wound to the heart is a hard one to do anyway.
Yeah.
Usually it's to the head or the neck. And so what on a personal psychological level, it was a tragedy. She tried twice before she was successful. I didn't know that until later, that she tried a couple times before. I knew one time was probably an attempt. And I could go into lots of different stories about those different times. But when we were all going to her wedding, we ended up at her funeral. And she'd stolen her fiance's gun and his car. And my brother and I went up early. And it was very telling to get halfway to her fiance's house, which was almost an 8-hour drive for us from where we were in Massachusetts. And realized that neither of us had brought any of our wedding attire or gifts or anything. Both of us knew we'd spent enough time with Allison to know that I was certain when I got the call from her fiance and he said, "Is Allison there?" I knew immediately that she was dead. And it took another day and a half when we were up there for it to be confirmed. But they found her body in his car at the edge of a quarry. Workers saw it sitting there for a few days straight and finally called it in. And, women don't kill themselves that way. So what was going on? And so beyond the personal psychological, which was a tragedy, I couldn't save her. My family imploded. We've virtually never spoken about it as a family, which is our family's pattern. It's a pattern of silence and shut it down. There's nothing to do about it. She's dead. An autopsy won't bring her back. Just move on. And for me, who's a heart-centered person and very emotional, I'm very solid in my mental and body now, but that was devastating to be in a family like that, where there's no processing, no conversation, no nothing. Devastating for me and deeply isolating. And sorry. And I wasn't far behind. I was very much in a suicidal mindset at that point, pretty lost, too separate from everything, and it was a problem. And I saw that, and it was almost like her death was my gift. I was in her room in her fiance's house for a couple nights before it was confirmed, or no, one night before it was confirmed that she was dead. My brother and I had gone on some misguided idea of meeting our parents, cutting them off at the pass, so to speak. those weren't the days of cell phones, and they didn't have an itinerary, and they were on their journey from Ohio with tentatively planned stops, but not necessarily knowing where they would be. And so we didn't see them until that Friday afternoon when they arrived before the wedding. And by that time, we'd already decided to call off the wedding because people were flying in and other things, and we needed to stop them before they got to the airports, whether or not she was alive or found, or, you know, it was just chaotic, as you might imagine. But I was in her bedroom at his house, and her wedding dress was hanging on a hanger over the door jamb. And that night, after we knew she was dead, I don't know if it was a street light or what, but there was light coming in the window, and I couldn't sleep. And I was trying to stifle I wanted to just scream and wail. I was a wreck. And I remember thinking, is there anybody else in the house? Is anybody like moved by this? And then another part of me didn't want to disturb anybody. It was just this odd thing. It's when I think of silence as violence. So I couldn't sleep, and I just remember saying, God, if there is a God, if you're out there, give me something. Help me. Give me something. And I heard a voice. It was another one of those times where I heard a voice, and it was as if James Earl Jones was in the room with me. No lie. And it said, say yes to life. That's all it said. Say yes to life. And I remember saying, fine. I have no idea what that means or how to do it, but okay. I was 24 then, I'm 58 now, and I spent the next couple decades trying to figure out what that meant and how to do it. And what aliveness looks like in me. And it's not a surprise that the people who find me now as clients, that's what they say to me. I feel dead inside. I feel like the color's gone, or there's just this dullness, and I'm shocked because I love my husband, or I love my wife, or, in so many ways I love my life, so I don't understand what's happening. Now, not everybody has had adverse childhood experiences, or, lots of trauma, or lost a sister to suicide, or anything else, but, we've all had losses and wounds and things that we don't understand, or stories we've made up about them that we stayed stuck in for way too long. And that's some of what, with some of my clients, I help them unpack, and in a gentle yet firm, safe container. And it helps them to get present again, and to get the color back in their lives, and the sense of meaning and purpose back in their lives, and they get to say yes to life. But with Allison, if I go back to that, one of the things that I've learned over the years, and I've worked hard to heal, to do a lot of healing work for a lot of different reasons, and to just grow, because I'm committed to growing. That's our nature. Both as a professional and in my personal life, on spiritual levels and practical applications. When I look at my sister's death, and I look at it beyond the personal psychological, beyond the tragedy that it was, and that it still is for me and for our family, and the loss that it was, and I look at it through another lens, or other lenses, and that's a lot of the work I do. I help my clients look at their dreams, look at the symbols, look at the energetically what's happening in their lives. There's so much wisdom there. There's so much information, and we haven't been trained to even notice it, not to mention make any meaning of it. And so if I look at what happened to Allison and our family, and I look at it through the symbolic lens, gunshot wound to the heart. It's like the ultimate act of penetration in death by somebody who couldn't penetrate in life. And then I choose to ask myself, what was my role in that process? Was I one of the impenetrable ones? And I believe I was. I had lots of layers of armor around my heart already too. I was very much in survival mode, in protect myself mode. If you win, great. If you don't, oh well. It was more in a win mindset, hearkening Covey stuff, not win-win.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you're stuck in victim mode, when you're stuck in survival. When that fight, flight, or freeze response never turns off. You're in toxic stress all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be there for other people. You can't even be there for yourself. Not in a resourceful, skillful, loving, compassionate, firm, nothing. You have, the capacity is so diminished. So I look at that and I say, okay. So if I was one of the impenetrable ones, is that who I want to be? And I have no clue what to do about it. All I can do right now is notice, be in the question, and start to open myself up to the answer. I so wish I had guides like me then.
Yeah.
I kind of stumbled along for a lot longer than I probably would have had to, and had made a lot of more mistakes. But so I know a lot of people think this is kind of maybe the touchy-feely stuff, and I don't even know if I believe in this, but let's say Allison had a contract, and let's say part of her job was to do what she did as a pattern buster, a wake-up call to the rest of us. Now I'm looking at it through the symbolic lens, right, and the energetic lens, not through the personal psychological, because through that lens I would look crazy right now, right? But what if her job was to illuminate the patterns in our family and in our lineage that are not serving anymore? And what if nobody's listening? I'm listening. It's what I do. And all I could do then was get curious, because I didn't know the answers. And as a coach, I'm not the one with the answers, you are. My job is to help you get to your wisdom. And yes, I can offer guidance or insights, but what I love seeing is my clients make their own connections and tap into the wisdom inside and cultivate a relationship with that inner guide and inner self, and have a vital inner life, and learn how to nurture that, learn how to grow it, let it inform their outer life and all the vehicles of their life. And that was the gift that Allison gave me, is the wake-up call. Say yes to life. And make it my responsibility. And there are times when silence is absolutely appropriate and necessary and a good decision or useful. And there are times when it truly isn't, and when it is violence. And so I'm an advocate for waking up enough and getting conscious enough to have the fierce and meaningful and sometimes very fun conversations that really wake people up and create openings, doorways, new possibility, illuminate new possibilities, make it, help us to come alive while we're alive. Because I was dead inside. I was in a slow burn. Allison did it quickly and pulled the trigger and called it a day. I mean, not so quickly because she tried a couple other times, but I was in a slow march. And now that's not true. One of Michael's nicknames for me is I'm his amplifier of life. And yeah, I walked the dark corridors for a long time, and I don't anymore. But I know there's gold there too. And I respect that part of our lives. And when we look for the patterns, when we look beyond the trauma drama and the stories, and we are willing to feel something, which is another thing I work with my clients on. when we learn that there's healthy fear, there's healthy sadness, there's healthy grief, there's healthy anger, they teach us things. These are skill sets. We have to get good at this again. It's made me a better woman, friend, wife, mother. I'd like to say I'm becoming a better sister, a better daughter, although my family we still have the scars. It's hard. This is fast forward how many years? We've been in Tucson for 11 years now almost. And back to that, I've never wanted my life story to be my story. And what do I have permission to tell? Right? I can tell my part of this Allison story. I can't speak for the rest of my family, and I wouldn't. But when we moved here, we got 2 landlines. One was for the house and one was for the office. You know, we were still in the early days of cell phones, right? And the very first day we moved in, I started getting phone calls on my business line. I didn't know anybody, and I hadn't handed that number out to anybody. And it was happening sometimes 3-4 times a day. And almost every day for the first few months we lived here. And the person on the other end of the phone, this is what they said every time. Is Allison there? Every single time. And I'd be like, excuse me? Hello? Who's calling? There's nobody here by that name. And they'd hang up. Every single time. And over the years I started to notice, because I've been, I've been one of those people who've been 15 years trying to write a book. And kind of got stopped in my tracks when I started trying to fact check my own stuff and my own history, and I found, the people who raped me, the people who did different things, and it just stopped me in my tracks for a while. But every time I'd come back to the book, the phone calls would stop, because I started tracking the calls. And then when I kind of set it aside again, phone calls would start. And it went on. I still get them every now and then. I got one probably like in the last 6 months now. I'd have to go back and check my calendar, but she's still here. She's still with me. This isn't just my story. It's our story. It's every person's story who's felt, I don't know, somehow lost or disconnected or isolated or just unable to process the experiences of their lives or make sense of things. And we live in a country that, like, we just are so separate from ourselves, and we're so focused on the doing and not so much on the being and not so much on the relating. And we've lost the skill set to be in relationship and to be connected, beginning with the relationship with ourselves. And that's been my work for the last 30 plus years. And I thank Allison every day. And I wonder what she would have been like, if she would have liked Oreo cookies and how she would have eaten them, or if she would have been married and had kids, or she was beautiful. She was really smart. Very edgy. She wasn't going to put up with all the BS. I was more willing to conform. I was the Athena woman. I was a good oldest. I found ways to fit in and make it work. And I was good at it. And I didn't mind. I did fit in enough and make it work. Although at the end of my career, I was told I was such a maverick and a edge walker and a pain in the ass and a rebel. And I was like, wow, I was trying so hard to self-manage and you had that still. But okay, whatever. But that also made me very creative. It also made me very gregarious. It made me very competent in large program management and in, helping to get employees engaged and focused and have fun while they're at it. So that was true too.